I never cried. Not until the day she threw me out of my own life. I used to believe a mother-in-law was meant to be like a second mom. Someone who'd guide you, love you, keep you safe. But she wasn't anything like that. She smiled to my face and stabbed me right in the heart. My husband, my so-called better half, chose her words over my tears. And that day she stood at the door with that smug little grin and said, "You'll find your way, love." Bloody hell, I still hear her voice in my nightmares. As I walked away from that house, I didn't shed a single tear. I felt dead inside, but somehow still alive. Something had changed in me that day. I wasn't the weak girl who stayed quiet anymore. I was a woman with fire in her chest and revenge in her veins. I swore to myself right there on that doorstep, "You've destroyed my world, mum-in-law. Now it's my turn." Years passed, but that day never left me. Her smirk, his silence, my broken heart. It's all burned into my memory. I lost everything, my home, my love, my pride. But pain is a strange thing, isn't it? It either breaks you or it builds you into something you never thought you could be. People say time heals all wounds. What rubbish. Some scars don't fade. They just learn to smile with you. And now, after all these years, the tables have turned. I'm not coming back to beg for a place in that house. I'm coming back to take back everything she stole from me, bit by bit. This isn't her story anymore. It's mine. It all started with the tiniest cracks, you know? Little things that didn't seem like much at first. A sly comment here, a backhanded compliment there. "You don't cook like his mom, do you, love?" she'd say, laughing, but her eyes were sharp, cutting right through me. At first I brushed it off, thinking she's just old-fashioned, harmless. But she wasn't. She was bloody clever. She knew exactly how to twist things. Every time my husband came home, she'd already planted seeds in his head. "She doesn't respect me," she'd whisper. "She's changed you." And slowly he did change. He stopped looking me in the eyes, stopped asking how my day was. One night he even said, "Mum reckons you're not happy here." I wanted to scream. I was happy until she made sure I wasn't. But instead I stayed quiet. Because silence felt safer than another argument. Then came the real blow. I caught her going through my wardrobe, my letters, every little thing that was mine. When I asked her what she was doing, she just smiled and said, "I'm just tidying up, dear. You've made quite a mess of things, haven't you?" That was the moment I knew. She wanted me gone. And it worked. Within weeks, my husband turned cold as stone. He didn't defend me, didn't even question her lies. One evening he stood there holding my suitcase and said, "Maybe it's best if you go stay with your parents for a while." Her shadow was right behind him, watching, pleased. As I stepped out, I didn't look back. But in my chest, I made a silent promise: one day she'll look at me and wish she hadn't started this war. The first few weeks after I left were hell, proper hell. My parents tried to cheer me up, saying things like, "It's just a rough patch, love. He'll come round." But deep down I knew he wouldn't. She wouldn't let him. My mum-in-law had him wrapped round her little finger, and I was just the outsider now, the one they all whispered about. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice in my head. "You'll never fit in," she'd say. "Women like you never last long." I'd clench my fists under the blanket, my heart burning with humiliation. I wasn't some silly girl. I'd given everything: love, loyalty, respect, and all I got back was betrayal. One morning I saw a picture online. My husband and her, smiling outside a fancy new house. The same house we dreamed of buying together. He'd actually bought it with her. Not a single call, not even a message asking if I was alive. That photo broke something in me. Something that never healed. But that's also the day I stopped crying. I wiped my tears and told myself, enough is enough. If she could play dirty, so could I. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for karma. I was going to be karma. I started from scratch, got a job, studied at night, and learned how to build a life on my own. People thought I'd fallen, but no one knew I was just sharpening my claws. Because when the time came, and it would, I'd walk back into her world not as the broken daughter-in-law she threw out, but as the storm she never saw coming. Years passed and life slowly started to look different. I'd built something for myself. A small business, a flat of my own, and a bit of peace I'd fought bloody hard for. But peace never stays long when your past still breathes. One morning out of nowhere I saw her again. My mother-in-law. Same smug face, same fake pearls, walking into the very cafe I owned. She didn't recognize me at first, new hair, new clothes, knew me. But when our eyes met, I saw it, that flicker of shock. She ordered a coffee like nothing happened, pretending she hadn't ruined my life years ago. I watched her from behind the counter, my heart pounding but my face calm. When I finally walked up to her table and said, "Morning, love. Been a while, hasn't it?" She froze. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice shaky. "You look different." I smiled, leaning closer. "Yeah, that's what happens when life stops kicking you and you start kicking back." She didn't like that one bit. You could see the tension building, like she'd rather vanish into her cup. I handed her the bill myself and said softly, "It's on the house, just like last time, remember? Only difference is, this time I own the bloody house." She left without finishing her drink, and for the first time she looked small, really small. I stood by the window watching her go and whispered to myself, "Game on." That moment wasn't revenge, not yet. It was a reminder. A signal to the universe that I was back, stronger than ever, and ready to take back everything she'd stolen. This wasn't closure. This was just the start of the payback. I decided revenge would be a quiet thing, bloody, patient and meticulous rather than loud and reckless. After that cafe encounter, I built a new life and let it speak for me. I volunteered at the church fete and helped organize a community bake sale. I took a course in bookkeeping and began trading for myself. I saved up and opened a small boutique that quickly became known for service and a warm laugh, mate. I smiled at everyone, hugged an old neighbor, and turned up at local meetings wearing sensible coats and a calm face, the sort that made people lower their guard and confess little things in passing. I made friends with the postman, the hairdresser, and the vicar. Ordinary people who liked me and spoke well of me without knowing why their words mattered. I let gossip do its slow work. Someone would mention how hard I'd worked. Another would note a quiet compliment about my business sense, and soon enough the whispers began to shift. I kept my tone warm and my patience narrower than a needle. The trick was to appear kindly, entirely harmless, while letting curiosity and doubt wedge into her certainty. I made sure to be seen at town events where she might appear, always polite, always helpful, never accusing. The idea was to let the contrast between who she believed I was and who I actually had become widen until people scratched their heads. I didn't stoop to slander or drama, nothing traceable back to me. Only well-timed compliments from mutual acquaintances, gentle reveals of competence, and the steady accumulation of small triumphs. Slowly, the sun began to notice my steadiness, neighbors began to ask questions, and even a few of her close friends, in private, started to flinch when she spoke too confidently. Piece by piece, her certainty began to wobble, and I watched her control begin to crumble. It was almost funny, watching her stumble in the same social circles she once ruled. The same woman who used to brag about her perfect family now looked over her shoulder every time my name came up. Her gossip mates, the same ladies who once sneered at me, started coming to my boutique, all smiles and tea talk. "You've done well for yourself, love," they'd say, pretending they hadn't laughed behind my back years ago. I'd just smile politely, offer them a discount, and let my silence sting louder than words. One afternoon, fate decided to have a bit of a laugh. My husband, well, ex-husband now, walked into my shop. He looked older, heavier, and completely miserable. His eyes darted around the place, clearly shocked to see how far I'd come. "You look different," he said. I laughed softly. "Yeah, I get that a lot lately." He told me things weren't great at home, that his mum wasn't the same anymore. She'd become bitter, lonely, obsessed with keeping appearances. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the day he stood at that door, holding my suitcase. That memory still burned. So I kept my face calm and said, "You made your choice, didn't you? Go home. She needs you more than I ever did." He left quietly, and I could almost see the guilt weighing on his back. And that's when I realized I didn't even need to destroy her myself. Life was already doing it for me. But the best part? I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The real revenge wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be poetic. And soon she'd find out just how poetic I could be. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted inevitability. So I became the quiet current under the surface, shifting things until the tide turned. I worked the room without entering the fray, praising her charity at meetings, sending helpful suppliers her way. dropping a word about bookkeeping at the vicar's, volunteering where she volunteered. That small kindness from me would be repeated by others as if it were theirs, and slowly the narrative about who was kind and competent in town rewired itself. I cultivated a few key friendships: the hairdresser who trims her fringe, the postman who brings gossip, and the old neighbor who loved to host teas, not with flattery but with honest courtesy, steady reliability, and a laugh when it suited. People began to say, "She's a decent sort," in tones that used to praise my mother-in-law. It felt like watching a portrait be repainted stroke by patient stroke. I also slipped in reminders to my ex's circle about days I'd helped when they were in a pinch. A borrowed van, a meal dropped at midnight. Small reminders told casually became recollections that softened minds. The son noticed the new stories, the neighbors remembered fresh debts of gratitude, and her friends found themselves comparing notes in private, voices low and uncertain. The more her authority chipped away, the more obvious her brittleness appeared. She started to preen less, to ask more, to seek reassurance where once she gave it. Best of all, I never shouted. I never shamed. I let ordinary kindness do the heavy lifting while her own arrogance multiplied the cracks. By the time she realized what was happening, her fortress had a dozen tiny doors I'd left ajar, and the wind was through them, making the whole place look terribly fragile. The next blow came without me even lifting a finger. Word spread that her finances were a mess. The very woman who once lectured me about running a proper household was drowning in debt. Apparently, she'd invested in some dodgy scheme a friend suggested, trying to double her savings. Typical her. Greedy for status, desperate to show off. The whispers reached me before they reached her son, and I'll admit, I had a quiet chuckle over my morning tea. Karma was finally having her say love, but I wasn't satisfied with karma alone. I wanted her to see that the woman she'd broken had risen higher than she ever dreamed. So I organized a charity gala, posh, elegant, and buzzing with the town's finest. I sent her a personal invitation, handwritten and sealed. The irony of it made me grin. She arrived, dressed to kill, pretending everything was fine. But her eyes darted everywhere, nervous, searching for approval that wasn't coming. When I took the stage to give my speech, I caught her staring, that old resentment flickering in her eyes. I spoke about resilience, about rebuilding from nothing, and about how true strength isn't born from ease, but from betrayal. The crowd applauded, some even wiping tears. She couldn't clap. Her hands were trembling too much. After the event, she walked up to me, voice cracking. "You think you've won, do you?" she hissed. I leaned in, smiling. "No, love. I didn't need to win. I just needed you to see who lost." She left before dessert, and I watched her go. That same woman who'd once stood over me in victory now shrinking into the night. But deep down I knew it wasn't over yet. The best part of revenge was still waiting. After that night, the town had fully switched sides. People who used to adore her now crossed the street to greet me instead. She became a whisper. An uncomfortable pause in conversations where she was once the headline. You could almost feel her slipping away, piece by piece, from the place she'd built her identity. And the thing about people like her, love, is they can't survive without an audience. Weeks later, she turned up at my boutique again. No pearls this time, no perfume. Just a faded coat and that look of someone trying to hold their world together with shaking hands. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I led her to the back office and made us tea just like old times. She looked around, noticing the framed awards on the wall, the letters of appreciation, my staff bustling happily outside. "I'm not here for your pity," she snapped suddenly. "Good," I replied, calm as ever. "Because I don't offer it." She sighed, sinking into the chair. "He's left, you know. Your ex. He moved out last month. Said he couldn't stand living with me anymore." I tilted my head. "That's a shame. You two were such a lovely team, when it came to destroying me." Her eyes watered then, and for a fleeting second she looked human. Vulnerable even. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. I smiled faintly. Funny how far looks different when you're the one standing on the edge. There was a long silence. She reached for her cup, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. For the first time I realized the truth. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She was just a ghost of the woman who'd once thought she could break me. But ghosts, still need to be laid to rest. After that meeting, she started showing up more often, at the cafe, at local events, even outside my shop, pretending it was a coincidence. The first few times I ignored her, but eventually I realized what she was doing. She was trying to be seen beside me, trying to borrow my shine to look relevant again. Typical, innit? When her world crumbled, she came crawling back to the one she'd buried. One afternoon, she walked in holding a small box. "Peace offering," she muttered. Inside was my old wedding bangle, the one she'd taken from me years ago for safekeeping. I turned it in my hands, remembering how it felt to wear it back when I was naive enough to think love and loyalty were the same thing. I placed it on the counter gently. "Keep it," I said. "It suits you more. Gold and guilt go hand in hand." Her face dropped. "You've become cruel," she whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. "No, love. I've just stopped being kind to people who feed on kindness." She left quietly, shoulders slumped. But this time I didn't feel triumph. I felt empty. Maybe revenge wasn't supposed to feel like this. Maybe it wasn't about winning, but about finally being free of the hold she once had. That night I stood by my window watching the rain fall against the glass. Somewhere deep inside, a thought began to stir. What if this cycle had to end with compassion, not punishment? But compassion for her? For the woman who destroyed me? The idea made my stomach turn. And yet, something in my chest whispered, the past won't die until you let it. The question was, could I ever let it? Days turned into weeks and something strange began to happen. I started seeing her everywhere, not as the monster from my past, but as an old woman clinging to her mistakes. She'd lost weight, her hair had gone completely gray, and that sharpness in her eyes had dulled into something almost sad. One evening as I was closing up shop, I found her sitting outside on the bench, drenched from the drizzle, clutching a small carrier bag. "What are you doing here?" I asked a bit harsher than I meant to. She looked up, shivering. Didn't know where else to go. For a moment I just stood there. The old me would have walked away. But revenge had already done its job. She was broken and somehow so was I. I sighed, opened the door and said quietly, "Come inside before you catch your death." She hesitated, then followed me in. I made her tea the same way she liked it, 2 sugars, no milk. Funny, the things you remember even after everything. We sat there in silence, the sound of rain filling the room. Finally she spoke. "You were right," she whispered. "I wanted control. I wanted everything to be my way. And I ruined it all." I didn't say anything. I just watched her, really watched her. The trembling hands, the tears she didn't bother hiding anymore. And in that moment something inside me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close to peace. When she left, she turned at the door and said, "You've become everything I wished you'd never be strong." After she was gone, I locked the door, leaned against the counter, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Maybe the revenge wasn't hers to suffer anymore. Maybe it was mine to release. A few months later, the phone rang early one morning. It was her neighbor. "She's not well, love," the woman said softly. "They've taken her to hospital." For a moment, I just stood there, the words hanging in the air like fog. My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, hadn't she earned every bit of her misery? But something deeper pulled me, something quiet and human. So I went. When I walked into that hospital room, she looked tiny, nothing like the woman who once ruled over everyone. Her eyes flickered open, and for a second she seemed surprised to see me. "You came," she whispered. I nodded. "Didn't think I would, did you?" She smiled faintly, that same smile she once wore in victory, but now it trembled. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice brittle as glass. "I thought I was protecting him. I was wrong." I sat down beside her bed and took her frail hand in mine. For years I'd imagined this moment, thought it would taste sweet like justice. But all I felt was sadness. Because this wasn't a villain anymore. This was just a mother, scared and alone, paying the price of her own poison. "I forgive you," I said quietly, surprising even myself. Her eyes filled with tears, not dramatic ones. Just the soft human kind. She passed a week later. I didn't cry. I simply stood at her grave, laid down a single white rose and whispered, "You destroyed my life once, but in the end, you taught me how to rebuild it." As I walked away, the wind caught my scarf and I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because the war was finally over. And for the first time in years, I felt free.